What's up guys, Nathan here. In an era of Path of Exile where scaling is king and bossing is a fact of life, miners are in one of the strongest spots they've ever been. Skills like Arc, Toxic Rain, and Ball Lightning are dominating the PoE.Ninja leaderboards. Basically, the miner rework from last league is still crazy strong, so I figured I'd give it a shot before GGG decides to bring down the nerf hammer. Today, I'd like to present to you a full guide for the build I've personally been using to kill Conquerors and farm the Atlas at Awakening level 8. The Fireball and Pyroclast Mine Saboteur. This isn't a new or unique idea, but I'd like to think my version of the build is simple to gear and understand, so hopefully it can act as a solid starting point for anyone interested in getting into mines. An interesting quirk of this build is the mechanics of Fireball. With greater multiple projectiles and fork, it's poised to be entirely focused on clear, but in reality, you'll rarely have to use Pyroclast. This is because Fireball explodes when it hits a wall or enemy, causing massive shotgunning AoE damage. With proper positioning, you can one-shot map bosses, metamorphs, and really any enemy that's not in an open area. The second quirk of this build is the weapon swap. In the rare scenario where Fireball isn't able to work its magic, we simply press X to switch to Pyroclast. This skill feels somewhat awkward and unreliable at times, but once you get used to mine sequencing, you can delete tier 16 Conquerors before they even have a chance to move. To start things off, let's take a look at the pros and cons. Pros: extremely high single target damage, great clear speed, satisfying explosions, great defensive layers, cheap to get started, and can do all map mods, all bosses, and Hall of the Grandmasters. Cons: miner playstyle is click intensive and not for everyone. Required weapon swap means no free gem leveling. Only average effective HP pool means you're vulnerable to unlucky one-shots. A bit expensive to push deep into the endgame. Next up, let's go over the leveling trees for this build. While I would normally focus on damage over survivability as much as possible while leveling, this build has some awkwardly high stat requirements, so we'll be prioritizing those a bit more than usual. If you want to just slap on an Astromentus until level 90, that works too, but I think the following trees should be a good fit for most players. To start off, simply go up through Trickery, into Blood Siphon, Assassination, and Saboteur. Next, head over to Arcane Will and Heart and Soul, which should help you sustain your mana throughout the majority of your leveling experience. Be sure to help Alira for your bandit choice, as all three of the stats she offers are highly beneficial. Speaking of leveling, I definitely recommend you try out various mines as they become available. Personally, I used Fireball, Blast Chain, Swift Assembly, and LMP, but you should definitely consider mines like Stormblast, Icicle, Arc, or whatever else looks fun. As for gear, your typical caster options of Lifesprig, Tabula, Wanderlust, and Goldrum will make your life much easier. Crewy Ward is also an excellent choice, as the dexterity, movement speed, and projectile speed are a great fit for this build. For the next leg of your leveling journey, you're going to start picking up some damage. Go up and around, picking up Successive Detonations, Volatile Mines, Written in Blood, and Blast Cascade. Continue on to take the Mine Damage Wheel, and if you're leveling with Fireball, consider socketing a Rolling Flames Threshold Jewel in this node. For your first lab point, take Pyromaniac, as the regen and mana cost reduction will make the rest of your leveling experience a breeze. This is where things start to get a little weird. I chose to continue down the right side of the tree, picking up Blood Drinker, Acrobatics, and Herbalism. If you have a decent jewel, you should also take this node for the extra 10 dexterity. Most miners would likely put off this part of the tree until later on, but unless you want to be constantly struggling for stats on your gear, this is the path I recommend. You can either take Bomb Specialist or Born in the Shadows for your second lab point, but I prefer the latter. As you make your way into the endgame, it's important that you fill in your stat requirements and prepare for the ever-increasing mana cost of Fireball. Head to the left, picking up Arcanist's Dominion, Annihilation, Essence Extraction, and Quick Recovery. Keep going into the Templar starting area, past Retribution, Discipline and Training, Light of Divinity, Holy Dominion, and all the way to Devotion. You'll likely be feeling a bit squishy, so don't be afraid to stick to low-tier maps until you get a few more levels. At this point, all you have to do is fill in a few more nodes around the tree, such as Cruel Preparation, Deep Thoughts, Doomcast, Phase Acrobatics, Heartseeker, and every jewel socket within easy reach. If you don't have good jewels, you can always take these nearby 5% life nodes while you save up currency. For your last lab point, take Demolitions Specialist. For the following section of the guide, I'll be talking about the recommended gem setups. As always, these are flexible and you should definitely consider making changes to better suit your playstyle. I will, however, go over the purpose for each setup so you can decide for yourself if you want to do the same thing. Your first and most important setup is for clearing, and it consists of Fireball, Greater Multiple Projectiles, Minefield, Fork, Combustion, and Trap and Mine damage socketed in your Tremor Rod. It's important to understand that you are not meant to kill bosses with this setup, as your single target damage will be pretty terrible without nearby enemies or walls to shotgun. Additionally, you may find Swift Assembly to feel much better than Minefield while leveling, so consider using that until you start to rack up some throwing speed. Your second setup is purely for single target, and it is Pyroclast Mine, Trap and Mine damage, Concentrated Effect, Combustion, Minefield, and Controlled Destruction. Because I personally find optimal mine sequencing to be a bit annoying, I rarely use Pyroclast outside of Conquerors and Metamorphs. However, when I do, it can lead to some hilariously fast kills. The next setup goes in your helmet, and it's made up of Wave of Conviction, Flammability, Stone Golem, and Herald of Ash. I'll get into this a bit more in the gearing section, but it's very important to craft trigger-socketed spells when you focus onto your helmet, or else the build will feel terrible to kill bosses with. These skills do not need to be linked. Next up, we have your gloves, which should contain Flame Dash, a level 6 Arcane Surge, Portal, and Summon Skitterbots, with only Arcane Surge and Flame Dash being linked. This is a highly subjective setup, as I've elected to use Portal instead of Smoke Mine, which is definitely a questionable decision for any miner. My last setup consists of Vol Righteous Fire, Steel Skin, cast when damage taken, and increased duration, with only the latter three actually being linked. Seriously, don't link Righteous Fire to cast when damage taken. I accidentally said to do this in my Essence Drain guide, and people kept asking why they were dying in the middle of maps. Just don't do it, please. Last but not least, it's time to talk about the gear. Just like with the gem setups, this section is flexible, but I did make some pretty specific decisions based on my overall goals for the build. Yes, you could totally do things like go low life, shield charge, or use mind over matter, but those would be entirely different builds, so I won't be going into those gearing options today. What I will do is divide this section into 3 parts: required, recommended, and luxury. The required gear will get you well into maps, even allowing you to kill high-level conquerors with just a little bit of practice. The recommended gear will have you farming all content, including Awakening level 8 maps and any boss in the game. And lastly, the luxury gear will be the overkill items you might want to get if you like phasing Cyrus faster than you can blink. Required. Magic flasks with the of warding, of staunching, and of heat suffixes. An enduring eternal mana flask. A diamond flask. A rolling flames threshold jewel. A tremor rod with as many links as you can afford. A chest with as much life and as many links as you can afford. A helmet with the crafted suffix trigger socketed spells when you focus. This is technically not required, but the build will feel much worse without it. And rares to fill in your resists, stats, and give you as much life as possible. You will need 126 dexterity to equip all possible gems, and 191 strength to equip your Calm's Heart, so keep that in mind when shopping for items. Recommended. Level 21 Pyroclast and Fireball skill gems. A Calm's Heart. 2 Circle of Anguish rings, ideally with increased buff effect and increased fire damage while affected by Herald of Ash. Try not to skimp here, as these rings can make up a huge portion of your overall DPS. A Martyr of Innocence for your Pyroclast weapon swap, with as many links as you can afford. A Wise Oak, as long as your fire resistance is higher than all your other resistances. A strong DPS-oriented amulet with stats such as spell damage, global crit multi, crafted mine throwing speed, and life. Once you have this, my top anointment is Destructive Apparatus, but some other viable options include Constitution, Soul of Steel, or Counterweight. Rare jewels with stats such as maximum life, mine throwing speed, crit multi, and fire damage. Better rares to continue to fill in your life, stats, and resistances. Luxury. Awakened support gems such as Fork, Greater Multiple Projectiles, and Controlled Destruction. A Bottled Faith Flask, which you can use to either replace your Wise Oak for a simple DPS upgrade, or your Life Flask if you feel comfortable with that. Some insane +5 Fire Gem staff with mine throwing speed. I honestly haven't even theory crafted the optimal weapon swap for Pyroclast, as Martyr of Innocence is more than enough damage for all content in the game. I would only look into this upgrade if you're doing multi-man carries, but if you're doing that, you probably don't want advice from me anyway. A helmet with the enchant Pyroclast Mine fires 2 additional projectiles, as well as the fossil mod nearby enemies have minus 9% to fire resistance. Better jewels and better rares with as much life as possible. This build barely breaks 6k life by level 95, so it's important to do your best to combat this shortcoming. And that about does it for this guide. The only other thing I want to talk about is mine sequencing, which is pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it, but unintuitive as hell before that. So, enjoy some bossing footage while I explain. When you press detonate, a mine sequence will start. This will cause each of your mines to go off, one after another, with the speed of these detonations increasing heavily over the course of the sequence. Continuing to throw mines will add more explosions to the sequence, and with enough throwing speed, you'll eventually hit a point where dozens of detonations will be occurring every second. The catch is that this is surprisingly easy to fuck up, at least for me. If you mash detonate during a sequence, you'll start a new one, ending your original chain prematurely. If you start throwing new mines into an existing sequence too early, you'll cap your mine count, which will remove your oldest mines, also ending your sequence before it can really start doing damage. If you're too slow to start throwing, the sequence will end before you can add more explosions. Since sequencing is so easy to mess up, I'd like to quickly go over the optimal order to use your skills in for maximum burst. Keep in mind, this is specifically aimed at Pyroclast in the context of this build, so your action priority may vary if you choose to make any personal changes. Around 5 seconds before your target becomes vulnerable, lay down all your mines. About 1 second before your target becomes vulnerable, press detonate and cast Flame Dash to proc Arcane Surge. Just before your target becomes vulnerable, pop your flasks, cast Vol Righteous Fire, and start throwing mines. Once you are sure your target is vulnerable, press your Focus hotkey. This will instantly apply flammability and fire exposure to your target without interrupting your throwing. If done correctly with proper gear, there are very few enemies in the game that can survive this burst. However, if your target does manage to live, it will likely be very low on life, allowing you to kite with Flame Dash until you finish it off. Okay, that actually was the last bit of this guide. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Nathan, and I'll catch you next time.
Thank you!
I just wanted to thank my awesome Patreon supporters, Real Human, Zikarak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia, Alan, Kepler, Sparky, Cat, Fusk, Putzak, Kaiser 801, Kyle, Logan, Ice Dude, Zinc, Anonymous, and Orangina. Oh, they're awesome. They're great. They're just the peak performance of human beings. That's for sure. If you want to join them, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob. Or if you want to support me and you just happen to have a Amazon Prime Twitch sub laying around, you can check me out at twitch.tv/NathanBrotherBob. I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time. That's cool. You can also check me out there. Give me a little bit of money and give Jeff Bezos a little bit of money at the same time. It's just everybody wins. That's not how that works. Anyway, there's also my Discord there in the bottom right hand corner. You can join that and hit me up if you need to contact me directly, or just chat with my community because they're cool. They know a lot about the game. They know more than me sometimes, most of the time, like half the time, like it's like 61% of the time. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.